everybody. Thanks for listening. I'm Jenny. I'm a life coach, and today I'm talking about breaking toxic love patterns for INFJs and INFPs. Um, one super common relationship pattern um, with anyone, not just empaths, is the people pleasing daughter with the irresponsible son, or the oldest daughter with the youngest son. And with this, we're talking about birth order dynamics. Um, so, you have narcissists and codependents, another common relationship dynamic. Um, so basically, what you're talking about is having a fixer with someone who needs to be fixed, or a responsible person with someone who is irresponsible. And even though this is very, very common, it is not healthy, and it's very crazy making, usually, for the more responsible person, especially, but also for everyone involved. Okay. Um, Men who grew up with sisters usually have a much easier time understanding women. And women who grow up with brothers often have a much easier time understanding men. And so, if you did not have brothers or sisters, if you're let me rephrase, if you're a man who wants to date women, and you did not have sisters, or if you're a woman who wants to date men and you did not have brothers, it's important to have advisors. It's important to have secret weapons to help you understand how the other gender thinks. And for homosexual couples, you can flip that. I apologize. I'm heterosexual, so that's the framing I use for a lot of this stuff, but I really want this to be applicable to anyone. So if you are, even if you're a woman who is trying to date women but you didn't have sisters, you probably have an easier time because you are a woman. But some of these things still apply. Um, so also, anxious attached person with avoidantly attached person, another very common but crazy making relationship dynamic. Um, it's very common for empath men to have a white knight complex, where they fall in love with people who need to be rescued. Um, my boyfriend did this with another woman, and I think he's with her now. So watch out for the white knight complex. Um, so so watch out for people who are over giving to people outside of your relationship, or don't have strong emotional boundaries with um, victims and people who need to be rescued. For empaths, this can be kind of intoxicating for rescuing people who love to rescue, and having someone who needs to be rescued can be very intoxicating and actually threaten your relationship if it gets out of control. Um, Infidelity in relationships. Um, Infidelity is really about dopamine. People who cheat often have dopamine regulation problems. The alternative to dopamine is having what's called here and now chemicals. More long-term bonding chemicals. So when you can see if this is something that you struggle with and it feels like something you don't have control over, you might want to start learning about dopamine regulation, and how you can kind of start to work with that. Um, Relationships also have a power struggle phase. And sometimes this is where relationships end, is because you get to the power struggle phase and you cannot find a way through it, or don't see it as temporary. You start off in a honeymoon phase, and then reality starts to set in. You start to see the person for who they really are instead of this idealized version. And then you come into the power struggle phase, where you're trying to find out what life looks like together. What parts do you get to have that you want? What parts do they get to have that they want? And you either come to a reconciliation, or your relationship falls apart. Um, After a certain amount of time in a relationship, reality hits and you realize that your dreams are not being fulfilled. Um, and sometimes we can believe that our partner is willfully ignoring our needs, even though that is not necessarily the case. Um, we or our partners know exactly what we want and how we want it, and our partner is refusing to cooperate. So this is the rude awakening phase of a relationship. But the thing is that it's normal. It happens in basically every relationship, and if it's not happening, it means someone is probably emotionally checked out to care, which is also a problem. Um, another pattern that's important to look for is over internalizing or over externalizing. Um, Usually, when a breakup happens, one person is blaming the issues on compatibility problems instead of the unhealed trauma that is ruling their lives. Um, and and the other person is looking at everything they did wrong and blaming themselves and taking more ownership over the problem than they deserve to be. So usually one person is is not self-reflecting, not taking accountability, and the other person is taking too much accountability. Another common problem that happens, if people understood how much attachment style affects how a person would treat them, it would be a prerequisite question for every relationship. And the anxious avoidant is the most common and the most crazy making pattern that happens. Attachment styles are the ways that we learn to relate to each other based on our first relationships with our parent figures. When we're born, we cannot self regulate, and we need an adult, a safe adult, to teach us how to regulate our emotions. Um, Parent figures do this through attunement, through connecting to our emotional state and offering support and reassurance. And so, if we had parent figures who were emotionally absent or chronically distracted or emotionally dysregulated or overly critical and shaming, we develop insecure attachment styles as a result. So they are not set. It's important to remember your attachment style is not permanent, but it is permanent unless you start doing something about it. It doesn't just go away on its own. You have to do something about it. And it's a guide for how we have learned to interact. Um, so with clear communication, with boundaries, with emotional awareness, and learning new coping mechanisms, we can all develop more secure attachment styles. And if you have a secure attachment style, you can successfully date almost anyone. You're not going to want to, but you could. Um, so, attachment styles are the ways we learn to relate to each other based on our first relationships with our parent figures. And most adults have some level of attachment trauma. um, Most adults did not have healthy relationships modeled to us. This is this is a symptom of planet Earth where dysfunction is the norm. And so, if good partners don't learn from their parents, they have to teach themselves. If our partners didn't have good parents to learn from, they have to teach themselves. Same goes for us. And some people don't teach themselves until they lose someone, and others never teach themselves at all. Sometimes it takes losing someone or worse to be in enough pain to finally do something about this. Um, so sometimes leaving someone is an act of love in that sense. Um, so attachment trauma comes from the first relationships we experience with parent figures. And if there was unpredictability or a lack of emotional connection, or if our parent was distracted or stressed, or if boundaries were violated or non existent, we learn that relationships are not safe. Um, so if you have a history of failed relationships, blame your parents. It's not your fault. You're wired based on how you were raised, but it is your responsibility, especially if you want to start having healthy, longer term relationships. Secure attachment style is the goal. It's what we're looking for. Secure people are direct. They talk about their feelings. They're validating. They are not scared of commitment. They have high self esteem. They have strong boundaries. and they focus on meeting both their needs and their partner's needs. Um, this looks like feeling safe in relationships, empathizing with what their partner is thinking and feeling. Give their partner space. They can give their partner space, but trust that the bond is not threatened and still exists. They are able to cope with conflict and stress without getting defensive or abandoning their partner or shutting down. They believe that their partner loves them and that their relationship can last. They feel safe going to their partner with their issues and their needs and asking for help. They believe that their partner values them for who they are. And during conflict, they can compromise. Sometimes we feel insecure around secure people because they don't need us. Secure people can make us feel insecure because they don't need us. Um, so pay attention to if you have a need to be needed and think about working on that. Acting secure is a choice. You can act as if you're secure. Um, Acting as if you are secure is a starting point in towards eventually actually feeling secure. So think about these patterns and think about how you can act as if you are these things before you consciously or subconsciously choose to act this way until you subconsciously get there. Um, Disorganized is a combination of anxious and avoidant attachment style. They have a desire and a fear of intimacy and vulnerability. They have extreme responses to feeling confronted. They have low empathy. They have poor boundaries. They are mistrusting of their partner. They constantly anticipate rejection. They are self sabotaging. They create a push pull dynamic and they send a lot of mixed signals. Um, so, an intense urge to connect and an intense fear of it. Um, they get very overwhelmed with emotions during conflicts. Relationships are very confusing and don't make sense to them. Um, they have love hate feelings towards their partner. They're always on guard in relationships. They don't feel worthy of being loved, and they assume that their relationship is never going to work out. Anxious attachment styles tend to overgive, have low self esteem, try to earn approval, have fear of rejection, can come across as needy, don't like being alone, worry excessively. They have lots of doubts about their partner's level of commitment. They have a deep fear of abandonment. They betray their own needs to meet the needs of their partner. They are hyper vigilant to every shift in their partner's mood, which is a childhood survival adaptation. They believe everyone will eventually leave them. They believe that their partner needing space is a threat or personal rejection. They sometimes manipulate their partner to get attention by making threats or by leaving. And if they believe that if they let someone fully in, that they won't be accepted. And they try too hard to make a relationship work, even when it's unhealthy. So, if you're an anxious person, it's important not to put all your eggs in one basket. If you're in the dating phase, try to keep all your options open. Try to weigh people against each other. Don't overinvest in one person. Anxious people only feel as safe as their last interaction with someone. Um, and so, um, and they're prone to attracting avoidant partners. Um, and and they they can tend to enable avoidant partners when they need to start being more ruthless with avoidant partners. So anxious people need to understand that they are good enough and to start asking who is good enough for you. Not are you good enough for them, but are they good enough for you? Healing trauma has nothing to do with how much they love you. It's based on how much you love yourself. Um, and if someone loves you but not themselves, betrayal is inevitable. People are complicated. They can love you and still betray you, which makes it very difficult to know who to trust. But it's not based on who loves you, it's based on who has healed their trauma and who is emotionally mature. Um, so, so if you need to stop picking the wrong people, start focusing on their flaws and ask who is good enough for you, and not am I good enough for this person, and not trying to prove you are good enough for this person. Avoidant attachers are suspicious of relationships and intimacy. They withdraw when a relationship feels too close. They're overly independent, emotionally unavailable, distant, hard to get to know, and bad at compromise. They feel suffocated and overwhelmed in relationships. They often feel that their partners are needy. They shut down during conflict. When their partner wants connection, they feel an urge to shut down. They believe that their partners expect too much of them. Maybe they're not supposed to be in relationships. Conflict is a sign that you're not supposed to be together. And they wonder who else is out there or if there's a better fit out there. This comes from a place of protection and a fear of conflict. Um, they're trying to protect themselves from your emotions, and they're also trying to protect you from having emotions. Um, and it's common to end up, it's common for people who have been through very chaotic, traumatic relationships to end up with avoidant partners who can be traumatizing in a different way. But because they're so detached from emotions, they can feel very safe and very grounding after someone who was more emotionally chaotic. So this is another thing you have to be careful about is avoidant partners can be very traumatizing to people who need a lot of support. But it's easy to end up with someone who feels so grounding and unemotional after you've been with someone extremely chaotic. Um, when avoidant people get triggered, if you're an anxious person, you're going to want a lot of reassurance. You're going to want to reach out to them, which is only going to push them away more. This is what is very crazy making about this dynamic. So when they shut down, you have to start doing a different dance. Instead of chasing them, you have to give them space. This is very hard to do because it's going to trigger a lot of anxiety and abandonment in you if you're with an avoidant person. Um, Avoidant people are very demonized on the internet and social media because they avoid, and they are also avoidant of change, which forces everyone else to do the accommodating, and it isn't fair. Um, it is because they're operating from a place of fear, but it still is very unfair to their partners. They're more likely to prioritize their comfort over the person who cares about them, and they often end up with people who enable or accommodate this behavior. And so if you have decided to stop enabling or stop accommodating this behavior, you can see it not as a punishment but as a kindness to yourself and to the other person. Um, when dismissive avoidants get very triggered, they have a protector fragment that comes in. This fragment can feel very narcissistic, very cruel, very cold. Um, and it can feel like you don't even know, you don't even know them. You don't even know them anymore. Um, so, so you have to either start picking different partners or start changing the dance that you do with them. Stop chasing them when they pull away and start kind of matching their energy. Um, Dismissive avoidants are more likely to think that the other person is the problem. They are more likely, this is not conscious, it's not conscious, and they're not trying to make other people feel inadequate, but that is their effect. People with avoidant attachment styles make everyone else question their worth. Um, and it's easier for them to fall in love with people that they work with, or people that they're playing sports with, because it's easier for them to bond with people when they're distracted by something else. Um, they're the most likely to throw away a healthy relationship. And um, so it's probably the hardest attachment style to date. But if they're conscious of their attachment style and they're working on it, that's worth considering. Um, it helps if you're dating a dismissive avoidant for them to have a therapist, and if they don't have a therapist, it's definitely going to help for you to have a therapist. Um, if 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 they're open to polyamory, or if you're open to polyamory, that's a much better way for everyone to get their needs met, because they're just not good at meeting emotional needs for their partners. Um, so if you're with a dismissive avoidant partner, it's going to be important for you. You don't have to go the polyamory route, but you're going to need other ways to get your needs met outside of your relationship. You're going to need a therapist, or you're going to need a good support group. You're going to need other ways to meet your needs outside of your relationship. This is going to be easier for extroverts because they already have a bigger support system. Um, Remember, this doesn't make them evil. This is all rooted in fear, but their effect can be very damaging. They have a lot of great qualities too. Avoidant attachers are usually very successful, very resourceful, very independent. They feel very grounding, very practical. But in the negative pole, they can be very selfish, very dissociated, very arrogant. Um, uh, and and the problem is that to work with a dismissive avoidant, you have to go against your instincts a lot of the times. You have to use logic, and this can feel so contrived that it almost feels manipulative. To consciously say, I'm not going to chase you, I'm going to turn away, can feel very contrived and manipulative. And if you have to work that hard, if you have to go against all of your instincts, you have to ask yourself if it's actually worth it to you, to do all of that extra work that goes against, you know, against your nature. Um, if you're an anxious attacher, you need to learn how to be direct and self-soothing. If you're an avoidant attacher, you need to learn how to be direct and reassuring. Basically, everyone just needs to be direct and communicate directly, to in order to act more secure. Um, I really think anxious attachers are the lead domino. When they stop playing into the push pull dance stops working. And then the other attachers are left with no other choice but to change. The general advice, whether you're anxious or avoidant, is to find someone secure, but that's hard to do because most secure people are already in relationships. Um, so, in the meantime, the greatest gift you can give yourself and your partner or any future partners is to go to therapy and learn to reparent yourself. And after you learn to reparent yourself, you are more capable of also reparenting each other. And you start to attract safe, reciprocal, supportive people. Most people spend a lifetime running from themselves into the arms of other people. But if you want a real love story, you have to get comfortable with having difficult conversations and facing the dark parts of yourself. True love is confronting. True love means being able to have difficult conversations with compassions. Most relationship issues are just patterns of childhood attachment issues coming to the surface. Um, and when a partner becomes highly emotionally activated, it loses their cool over something that seemingly should be small. That's when those wounds are being activated. It will look like an overreaction, but most of the time it's actually they're reacting to a past event, something in their past, a trauma in their past. And this is why compassion, grace, and clear and open communication is so important in relationships. Relationships are transactional, but most people contribute either too much or not enough, and they're usually together. And so change happens when overgivers stop entertaining undergivers, and making those undergivers bring more to the table, um, or finding someone else who does. So here's what it looks like to be in a secure romantic relationship. There's mutual trust. There's mutual freedom of expression. There is an acceptance of flaws. There is a respect for autonomy. There is a mutual giving and meeting of needs. There's compromise without sacrificing your sense of self. You're not looking to compete or be chosen. You're looking for mutual compatibility. Can I fit into this person's life? Can this person fit into my life? Will I be accepted for who I am? Can we add value to each other? um, no instant urgency to commit, transparency, not trying to oversell yourself or people pleasing, mutual giving and receiving, clear boundaries, a curiosity about the other person, um, being open with your fears and being vulnerable, validating each other's feelings, directly expressing your needs, respecting the other person's autonomy, privacy, and agency, being comfortable apart and being comfortable with closeness, considering the other person's needs, compromising when you can't meet everyone's needs, feeling accepted and like you can show up how you are and like you are seen and heard. Um, in the power struggle phase, a secure relationship um, is still going to present differently than an insecure relationship. There will be repair after nitpicking or conflict or disagreement. You can have difficult conversations. You are able to self reflect and see your role in any problems. You're focused on the solution. How can we find a middle ground? Not keeping score. Secure relationships are not perfect because they involve two flawed humans. But even in secure relationships, there will be friction, there will be conflict, and there will be triggers. You will be triggered. But secure partners understand this and they maintain a sense of self. They keep their sense of self intact. They don't overgive. They don't allow boundaries to be violated. They don't betray themselves. They don't expect their person to be perfect or have fairy tale qualities. They're self aware and they have emotional availability. They're comfortable talking about emotions and they can handle when someone is upset or struggling without shutting down. They have repair skills. They seek solutions in conflict because they can self regulate. They can have difficult conversations and engage with another person without becoming defensive or shut down. So, this is what we're looking for, and this is what we're trying to embody. Um, so, if you're looking to gain the skills to build more secure relationships, you're looking for something that feels safer, something that feels easier. The problem is that sometimes this will feel boring. If you're used to unhealthy relationships, secure relationships might feel boring. And you're going to have to take your time and figure out, um, give it time to figure out if it's actually boring or if it's just safe. Sometimes maybe it is boring. Um, Sometimes it's very hard to discern between boring and safe. But at first, even a safe relationship will feel boring. And if you take your time and really look at it, you'll start to see that you were mistaking safety for boredom. Um, the thing about being anxious in a relationship is the more secure you feel, the more open and free you become. Having a sense of security, it's common for partners to feel like your need for security is an attempt to control. But if they can offer you that security, you can actually become so free and open and relaxed. And so there's a great quote from a book about attachment styles called Attached, which sums this up really well. And it is the dependency paradox, which is you are only as needy as your unmet needs. Most people are only as needy as their unmet needs. The more effectively dependent people are on one another, the more independent and daring they become. So if you want someone, if someone in your life feels controlling or like they can't relax and have fun, they just need to be able to depend on you. A lot of the times, they just need to be able to depend on you, and then they can become more independent and daring through that. So another paradox, like I always like to talk about. Um, you're not being dependent on another person. You're not being independent of another person. It's about being interdependent. It's a balance, like everything. For your homework, I want you to make a list of what your qualifiers are as far as a short term relationship when you're still qualifying people, and then a serious long term relationship after you've you've started to qualify people. So you want to have to funnel, you want to think about funneling down. You should not have strict requirements at the very beginning of dating someone, but you should have some requirements. Okay. So decide, just it's like setting levels, right? So decide like what your level one requirements are to just let people into your funnel, and then what are your high level requirements to in order to commit to someone. And if you're already in a relationship, you can, think about um, what changes you want to see in your relationship, or if you're in a healthy relationship. I don't know why you're here. So thanks for listening, everybody. I hope this was helpful. If you want coaching or more information, links are in the description. Thanks so much. Bye.